We began this conversation. I'm wary I'm going to have to relinquish all the many things I want to ask you and move over because, of course, the audience who are listening in will have their questions. But I just wonder, we began talking about how you're at home because, of course, the pandemic of the last year or so has kept you from traveling. And of course, it's been tragic in so many ways, not least showing how what can happen when we exploit animals in this way, and people know the most likely causes of it or the given causes of it. But ultimately, does this feel like a time of hope, and the fact that there are more people listening and seeing it as a moment to come together and create change? When you talk about disaster and danger, often do bring out that indomitable human spirit, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And there's no question that that awareness has grown. And the problem was too many people were feeling helpless in the face of the problems. So that, this is my message, to give people hope, to hope meaning take action and then you will become more hopeful. And so there's a much greater awareness that we brought the pandemic on ourselves by our disrespect of animals. We have brought climate change and loss of biodiversity on ourselves. People are beginning to understand that even if you live in the middle of a city, you still are part of the natural world and you depend on it. Clean air, clean water, food, shelter, everything. But we depend on healthy ecosystems. And a healthy ecosystem has this amazing tapestry of interrelated organisms. And as they go, it's like pulling threads from the tapestry until it hangs in tatters. And then the ecosystem will collapse, and it's happening. But when you realize that we can turn things around, that we still have a window of time, and if we get together, we absolutely can turn things around. And we know so many, some of the scientific innovations, some of the way people are behaving, some of the stories. And I found when I went to Tanzania 2 years ago, we had a big roots and shoots gathering, all the different groups from around the city of Dar es Salaam getting together to share projects and, talk to each other. And at the end, they came together and they were all standing up and saying, "Together we can," meaning we can save the world. And I said, yes, we can. But will we? Do we have the will? Can we take the steps necessary? And they thought about it. And then they got together and they said, together we can, together we will. And so I started doing that in the lectures I was giving, getting 10,000 people jumping to their feet and saying, together we can, together we will. Even a whole lot of CEOs and government people in Davos. Imagine.
That's exactly where I wanted to end. It's like you can see my question notes, Jane, because I wanted you to explain exactly that in Davos they were jumping up singing, together we can, together we will. And I think at a wonderful music concert, you say it brought tears to your eyes. You were at a concert in Germany, was it?
Oh, the one talking about the species disappearing one by one.
But they all chanted with you, together we can, together we will.
Oh, yeah. Oh no, yes, that was a big, second biggest music festival in Europe, and there were about 18,000 people there. And yes, they all yelled it out: "Together we can, together we will." And that's the spirit we have to, just like Churchill did in World War II. He got the British people to say, "We will not be defeated." And basically, there was no hope back then. I was here in the south of England. We were protected from the might of the Germans by a little bit of scaffolding and barbed wire. We weren't prepared. We weren't prepared for war. And their armed forces were powerful. But we had Churchill inspiring this: we will not be defeated.
Just before, this is my last question to you. Of course, we're in a very, feels like a very good evening to be having this conversation. I mean, there would never be a bad evening to be having it, but green issues are right across the agenda, particularly here at the moment in the UK. We have the Conference of the Parties starting very imminently. Do you feel a sense of hope about meetings and things like that, where governments come together? Do you feel a sense of hope when you look to that?
Well, I really do feel that many of the people who will be taking part truly, truly understand that we have to do something. I mean, Paris was really disappointing. They all came together, they all made agreements, they all said that they would reduce their emissions to a certain level. I don't think a single country actually lived up to what it promised. And, you know, the fear is that COP26 will have the same sort of result. But I just have this feeling that there really, really is more awareness of the fact that we are facing the destruction of our own species if we don't get together. And unfortunately, some nations seem disinclined to take part in doing their share, but I think Britain is more solidly committed to really, really trying to make change. And the European Union certainly is. And half of America is, and half of it isn't.
Oh, I hope so. There's so much to discuss. How could we do this in an hour? I'm going to ask some of the audience questions, and Bess just is asking about the four, just to articulate. We've been through them, but the 4 pillars of hope, if you could just outline what they are. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the human intellect, because we are beginning to understand, we are beginning to come up with innovative solutions. We are beginning to think about our own ecological footprints and think how we can solve some of the problems. 2, the resilience of nature. Like I described flying over Gombe, and the little tiny park was surrounded by bare hills. Because of our Tukari program, there's no bare hills anymore. The trees have come back. Places we've utterly destroyed can once again support life. Animals on the brink of extinction can be and have been given another chance. Then thirdly, there's the power of young people. Once they know the problems and we listen to their voices and we empower them to take action, not aggression, not violence, positive action. And then finally, this indomitable spirit, the people who tackle what seems impossible and succeed.
It's interesting, you just mentioned that about to take action, but not to be sort of extreme. And someone is asking what you feel about those who are quite militant and perhaps aggressive about delivering messages of the need of positive change for the environment. Does it sometimes mean that the way they do it means that the message gets lost?
I think sometimes it's counterproductive. I think right at the beginning of all these various movements, you know, way back in the time of the suffragettes with Mrs. Pankhurst and the others tying themselves to the railings of Parliament. You know, I think at the beginning, some of these, but not the violence, not the violence. I mean, animal experimentation is horrible, it's cruel, it's awful. But when the animal rights people go in and raid a lab and let all the animals out, they let out the mink in the UK, who've been roaming the countryside and multiplying and killing all our native animals. And so we just need to be, you know, my way has never been violence. It's always been trying to reach the heart. Because I think only when you reach the heart and people change from within, will you get real change, real commitment to change.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a lot in the book about the importance of speaking to the heart, the importance of stories rather than facts and figures. It's so interesting and so true. And perhaps something also that a woman, as we started at the beginning, with empathy and patience brings to this issue in spades. Somebody asked, children can be great motivators, as you have illustrated in your story during this conversation. Is there a program we can put in place in all schools globally in which children, young and old, can take part in action and consequently involve their parents and neighbourhoods and beyond? Or is there something already out there? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
So you could answer the question. Roots and Shoots, anybody can start a group. We like you to join and register because we like to share what you're doing and bring you into this global family. But we've had we had a grandmother group. It was 4 grandmothers and their daughters and the grandchildren, and they all got together and did projects, you know, to make the world a better place. And so we've had so many examples of young people, children, changing their parents and their grandparents. And I gave that one story of the CEO in Singapore whose daughter really pushed him to make change. And so anybody, we have roots and shoots in some retirement homes. We have roots and shoots in some prisons. It doesn't matter, it can grow anywhere, but it has to be animals, people, environment, all 3.
Now, somebody asks, and somebody always asks this of the guests, but it's very interesting to hear from you what you are, if you have indeed the time, given how much you are doing, what you are reading at the moment.
Well, actually, the last book I read, and I managed to get through about a few sentences in the day because there isn't time to read. The last book I read was a book by the arborist, you know, arbor like tree, arborist. And she discovered what she calls the 8th continent, and it's up in the treetops. She invented the entire way of learning about the life that never comes to the ground. It just lives up in the tops of the trees, and how important that is. And the other one was one somebody sent me called Cult. I think it's a young woman who was brought up in a cult, the Children of God. And it's chilling and an amazing book which explains what it's like to grow up in this abusive society.
Another question comes from somebody who comes back to the topic we were talking about a little bit about animal products, and they said, what more can be done to educate the public about how animal products are produced to raise more awareness of how to buy food ethically? I mean, it's a very difficult and needs a lot of thought, but I wonder your thoughts.
Well, we do have information out there in our Roots and Shoots program. There's an awful lot of groups of young people who are learning about this. And I never, you know, I don't like being dogmatic. It's not good to say to children, you can't eat meat, it's bad. You don't say that, but you can very gently and quietly talk about, I mean, I show people, children, a photograph of, do you know about pig casso? Not Picasso the artist, but pig.
Yes, yes, I've seen it. It's in your book, isn't it?
Yes, it is in my book, even a picture. So that pigs are as intelligent as dogs. I tell stories about, you know, the different things that animals have done, the farm animals. And then I think mostly the children themselves decide they don't want to eat meat. But there are now alternatives to meat. If you can't bear not to eat meat, there's meat alternatives derived from animal I think it's from stem cells or something, can't remember. But no animals are killed. And once they get the culture, that's it. They don't ever need it again, like yogurt, I suppose. And, you know, but to move towards a plant-based diet, that's the key thing. And when you realize the huge amounts of environment destroyed to grow the grain, the fossil fuel that's used to get the grain to the animals to the abattoir, the meat to the table, when you realize how much water is used to change vegetable to animal protein, when you realize that they are responsible for about at least a quarter of the most dangerous greenhouse gas, which is methane. You know, when children learn that. Yes, there she is.
Here we go. There's this wonderful picture in the book. I wonder if people can see. That's Pig Casso, who I hadn't learnt about. And it's just one of the many heartening and lovely stories that you tell in here.
And Pig Casso was rescued on her way to slaughter. And the rescuer was an artist, and she noticed that this pig was absolutely fascinated. So she set up an easel, and Pig Casso is so happy. And she holds the brush in her teeth, and she actually dips it into the different colors.
Somebody asked what areas of study you would recommend a young vet student who has Tanzanian grandparents interested in wild animals and conservation to get into.
Well, there are various programs in various um, universities now that do, I couldn't tell you, but it's all online. There really are, especially for people wanting to be wildlife veterinarians. And I know mostly the ones in the US because we work with them, but there have to be some in the UK as well.
Thank you for that. Now, as I said at the beginning when we started talking to you, that I promised that I would let you go by 7:30 because that's the end of the event. It's very hard to just condense all the many things that we want to ask you into this hour. But I know that you kindly said if you have a question for Jane, you can email it. I expect to the How To Academy or to one of us, and we will pass it on to her. And she's very kindly said that she will reply and answer. And reading the book, listening to the podcast, and seeing everything Jane does, I believe that she's completely true to her word. And Jane, I know the reason we have to let you go is one of the things that comes up in the book is that when you're thanking everyone and your team and the support that you have, you also give a little thanks to something else you say that it could not be done without, and that is a nightly ritual of a little tot of whiskey.
That's right. A little tot of whiskey. It's for my voice. It works for your voice. And Mum and I had this little thing. She couldn't drink wine and she couldn't drink water. But so whiskey was her little tipple, a little tot each night. So I would join her when I was here. And we had a thing that wherever I was in the world at 7 o'clock, we would raise a glass to each other and drink to each other's health. So I will drink to the health of everybody. And by the way, don't start asking questions till you've read the book, because I'm not going to answer questions that I've carefully explained in the book.
I think that is very fair enough. And with that, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'll raise my imaginary whiskey to you. And thank you so much to everyone who signed in as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I thank you all. And I thank you too. You've been a fabulous interviewer. Some people, they literally don't know what they're talking about. And they're the most stupid waste of time interviews. But this wasn't. And I will just say goodbye to everybody with, chimpanzees have a distance call to identify themselves. So I think a good ending of this hour would be the chimpanzee distance greeting call, which is. And on top of that, I wish you all would join me and say, together we can, together we will. Please.
Jane, thank you so much. We will all be doing that. Everyone at home is doing that in their houses very loudly.
Good. I'm sure they are. Bye and thank you.